All right, guys, welcome back to the Discovering Eden podcast. My name is Brandon,
And I'm Jonathan.
and this time we have it recording properly. It likes to, when it double clicks when I hit it, so it's like start recording, stop recording.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a technical hullabaloo earlier.
At least it wasn't like one of the previous weeks where that same exact scenario happened, and I didn't realize it until half an hour into the video, and then I'm like, oh,
I've been talking at a computer screen.
we've been just talking and nothing's recording.
Yeah, that's about right. It was
So-
probably a great conversation. I think it was one I missed.
I think that was the vampire one, to be honest.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, that was and then we tried to recreate it the next week and it was just
And
it was good.
It
but
was it was all right. It didn't have the same level. I mean, the episodes still did okay.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, without further ado, I'm gonna get into prayer and then we'll kind of dive right into the conversation.
Let's do it.
So, dear God, I just thank you that we're able to even commune with you. Wow, I can't even talk. Commune with you like this every week. Thank you that we're able to do this, and first and foremost to put you in the center of it all. So I pray that you would just kind of be with us as we talk about spiritual warfare again, and with the discernment of voices, Lord. I pray that you may be glorified in this conversation, and that we may be vessels to actually speak your truth forward. Again, just be with us as we talk about this. Protect us from the enemy. And I pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, we'll get into the bumper and then we'll get on with it. Anyway, let's go.
Outside of it.
All right. So I know in my notes it says something different. We'll get to it because I think it's a lot deeper of a conversation that I feel like I can't accurately move into without doing a little bit of research ahead of time. I have testimonies and stuff for it, but we'll leave it for a later conversation. So what instead we'll talk about this week. Obviously you don't know any different, but we do. Is we're gonna be talking about discerning voices. So how do we know what is from God? How do we know what is from the enemy? And how do we know what is from us?
Yeah.
Especially when we think in terms of spiritual warfare. Because I don't know about anybody else, but for me, my mind goes at 1,000,000 bazillion miles an hour.
Yeah, I feel that.
And I tend to overthink things and possibly even try to attribute different things to different voices.
Sure.
Like sometimes you question, is that from God? Is that from me? Or is that from the enemy?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's such a muddy middle that how can you discern it?
It's a great question. I'm very excited to talk about this because I'm excited to learn. No, I'm dead serious. This is one of those, like, it is a complicated conversation. I guess that's all of spiritual warfare, but I think even for us who have grown up in the church, like, I sit there and I still think, like, is that God? I don't know. Or is that just what I want to hear?
Well,
You know,
and there's a lot of doubts,
Sure.
I think, that often creep in. And doubt can be a powerful ally, yet it can also be a powerful adversary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because doubt is also, it causes us to learn and explore and discover, but it also allows us to second guess
Yeah, it goes
and
back to that
question
overthinking.
and I don't want to say doubt to doubt again, but it I maybe a better way of putting it is it lessens the authority we think
Mm,
it might have,
sure.
or we question its origin,
Mm, yeah.
which then makes it seem like we can't trust it as much.
Sure.
But yeah. So I think all of us can say that we struggle one way or another um with this idea of good versus evil.
Mm-hmm.
This idea of this is the right thing to do and this is not the right thing to do. Like that kind of thing. And that it ultimately a lot of this boils down to some of that where, you know, I guess simply speaking, you can say, "Oh, what's from the enemy is something that's destructive or, disruptive." Whereas something from God is, well, it should be good, uplifting, constructive.
Yeah.
And then us, well, we're somewhere in the middle.
And I think, for me at least, discerning between God and the enemy is a little easier than discerning between God and myself.
Yeah.
Um, because I think a lot of the times, you sit there and you think, well, this is what I want to happen, and that thing isn't intrinsically bad. Like it could build you up, but is that God or is that me?
Yeah.
Just
And that's the big kicker too. And how often is some of that influenced
sure,
by the enemy?
yeah, absolutely, and yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting conversation, and it's so deep, and there's so many layers to it.
It's an
Um,
onion.
it is an onion. Spiritual warfare is an onion. That's
Clip
a
it.
t-shirt idea.
Clip it right there.
That's a t-shirt. Get that on a t-shirt right now. But I'll jokes aside, I'm serious. Like there's a lot of complexity to it. Um, I don't really know where I'm going with this. I just kind of started talking, and
That's fine.
somebody's got to cut me off before I lose my train of thought.
I guess one of the things that I guess I'll lead the conversation in this way.
Sure.
I think sometimes like when you're at church or something, and when you kind of approach this topic of how do you discern,
Mm.
God's voice or different things like that. I think a lot of the times you get to this construction versus deconstruction viewpoint
Mm.
of, well, the enemy's always going to tear down, destroy, mess things up, separate, segregate, fill in the blank.
Yeah.
It's trying to separate you from God
Mm-hmm.
versus the inverse of that, which God is trying to construct, build up, surround yourself with other believers and strengthen in community
Yeah.
and build one another up. And that is more of what's in line with God. That's the simple view. Obviously, it stands a little bit more complex than this. And like a good example, I think, that would fill into this narrative a little bit. Think of criticism. Is criticism good or bad?
It's highly dependent, right? I mean, you've got constructive criticism, which, even though it might sting, is meant to build you up and improve and help you grow. But then you've got criticism, which is simply meant just to break you down and to hurt.
And sometimes when we're in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
we can't discern one from another.
Yeah, 100%. I actually have kind of a funny story. Well, it's funny to me. You guys obviously, if you've followed along with the whole podcast, you know that both of us are writers. One of the things when I was working on my book probably about a year or two ago, I have a buddy who has been gracious enough to read everything I've thrown at him, and give me a lot of feedback. And there was a particular scene that I had written that I was really proud of, and he came back to me and said, look, it's good, but boy, it could be a whole lot better if you just did this, 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 and this. And in the moment, I was already so excited about this to have somebody come in and say, it's good, but here's a way to improve it in multiple different ways. Definitely stung. And at first, I was kind of angry and frustrated, and kind of hurt. But then after taking some time away and actually applying what he said, that discernment comes in. You start to realize, okay, it was constructive criticism. What his suggestions were actually beneficial. Obviously, that has no relation to spiritual warfare, but it's an anecdote that I think relates.
Well, and it's an anecdote because I think so often, like when we're in that position of, being under criticism, and maybe this partially tackles the question of why does bad things happen to good people?
Sure.
Well, what is that bad thing, and what is it actually doing for you?
Interesting.
Is it causing you to ruminate, or is it causing you to reflect? If you're there kind of wallowing in self-pity, what does that really do? And I know that sounds harsh, and part of that could be because of the constructive criticism and different things of
Sure.
that. Some of these things that happen can sometimes seem harsh, whether that's the loss of a loved one or something like really impactful, like how can God let this happen?
Sure.
Where I think it's hard for us to sometimes realize what is God trying to say to us in this matter. And some of that even can boil down to some of the prayers that we even pray. Like there's some powerful, powerful prayers in the Bible.
Yeah.
That if you actually look into it and read them, if God follows through with what you're saying, it will shake your life up. A lot of times people pray for let your will be done. Well, what does that look like?
Yeah.
It's not our will.
No. I mean, there's no possible way we could know that, what that will is, until
sometimes it may not even make any sense to us.
Yeah.
Like, how can the death of a loved one actually benefit, God's kingdom?
Yeah. And like you said earlier, that sounds incredibly harsh. And I think it can be really hard to disassociate from that fact and try to look at it objectively, like we're attempting to do. But
and part of that, and this is why people pray for discernment a lot, because you have to look at it from an earth scope view.
Yeah.
You can't look at it, through a microscope.
Yeah.
You have to look at it at the big picture, which is kind of hard for us to do. Like so often in our culture, we're so focused on us as like, for example, like the U.S. is its own thing versus the other countries. How often do we actually talk about the other countries like in the news? Unless it's something like drastic.
Sure. Not very often.
Like the only way that I know other things that are happening in the world is if I actually actively look into it.
Sure.
Because we're isolated.
Yeah. Well, you go even smaller than that. I mean, just even beyond just the U.S. I mean, you look at in your day-to-day life, you're more focused on your own family than your neighbor's family. You're more focused on your own life than your brother's life. I mean, it really just, you can keep narrowing that view down, and it still proves the exact same thing. We're really mostly focused on our own little bubble, whatever that may be.
Well, I mean, we essentially have tunnel vision.
Yeah.
Because we're not focusing on anything else. We're keeping our focus basically at our feet. Well, how can you look forward if you're only looking at your feet?
One eye down, one eye up.
We're gonna chameleon this. Yeah, that's just a little bit of it. When I think of, discerning God's voice, obviously there's a couple of passages in the Bible that come to mind. One of the ones that comes to mind the most for me is the calling of Samuel as listening to God's voice and kind of the discernment of it. So I'm going to pull that up. I should have probably pulled this up ahead of time, but I'm not foresighted enough to actually think through things. Oh, no. Okay. Technology's hard. All right. Oh, now I gotta go to the Bible app. All right. First Samuel. Oh, I can't spell. It's fine. Everything's fine. But that's still not how you spell Samuel. All right. Nope. Nope. There we go.
It's SAQN.
Okay.
My foot's stuck.
So it's First Samuel 3. I probably should have said that ahead of time, but I was too busy trying to spell and misspell Samuel for some reason because my fingers are fat and yeah. How much do I want to read this? Like of this? You know what? We're going on the whole thing. Why not? And it's like I don't really want to leave it out because it makes okay, whatever. So this is basically the whole thing of 1 Samuel 3. So this is the Lord calling Samuel. The boy Samuel ministered before the Lord under Eli. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare. There were not many visions. Pause. To be honest, does that not sound a little bit like today?
Yeah, a little bit.
And maybe this is why this resonates so much with me. Is I know there's visions that happen. It's not like it's rare for God to speak, but so often the way God speaks is different.
Yeah.
God doesn't necessarily speak in visions and things that are super easy to understand or hear.
Yeah, it's not always going to be a burning bush moment, right? It's
No.
a lot of the times much quieter and
Like you hear it around the church, it's a whisper.
Yeah.
But you're not actually hearing anything. It's almost a gut feeling.
Yeah. It's that famous silence of God, right? Sort of idea.
So it's really hard to explain, like, what is the voice of God? Well, the voice of God is not this brazen, obnoxious, loud, booming voice that you hear. That's typically not how you're going to hear God. If you hear God that way, you should probably listen.
He's trying to send a very direct message.
I can't say that I've heard God in that way. No. Have I personally heard God? I believe I have, like audibly. Mm-hmm. Do I remember what was said? No, because I was in shock and my face was to the floor. I kind of briefly mentioned that last week, I believe.
You did.
Man, do I wish I remember what was said. You would think, oh, it's from God. It must be important. And I'm like, yeah, it probably was. But my idiot self was probably like, deer in the headlights. Like, oh, dang. Oh, it's over.
What just happened?
Huh? The first thing I did when I even had that, experience is I immediately left the cabin. I'm like, is it still there? Like, what's going on?
Like flashlight? Is that what that was?
No, like, I look up, everybody's still in bed because nobody was in. It was just basically me alone in the dream, but in the same, like everything was the same.
But you were by yourself.
But I was by myself. So I go around, everybody's sleeping. I'm like, open the door, nothing. No, okay. That was odd. Maybe I should write this down. So I did. Mm-hmm. And that's how I can still remember it. But then I try to remember what was said, and I'm like, well, crap. I was so like overwhelmed and like it's information overload almost. And it's like, wow, I don't remember a thing that was said. And maybe it doesn't matter what was said,
Mhm.
rather than congratulations, you experienced God. And, maybe it's for me to talk about later. I don't know. It's some of that thing that confuses me. I'm like, man, if you said something to me, boy, do I remember. I wish I remember what was said. But anyway, that was a sidetrack.
It's
That
all
was a
right.
little tunnel, rabbit hole.
I've done plenty of those. It's okay.
So we finished verse 1. So there were not many visions. Kind of related again to today, where I do think there is some similarity between the two. Even though obviously in the New Testament, like men will dream dreams, different people will prophesy. I don't remember the exact verse that's in, but it's a verse. It's in the New Testament. It's probably in Acts somewhere.
Makes sense.
Um, yeah. Anyway, verse 2. So one night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming so weak that he could barely see, was laying down in his usual place. The lamp of God had not yet gone out, and Samuel was lying down in the house of the Lord, where the ark of God was. Then the Lord called Samuel. Samuel answered, "Here I am." And he ran to Eli and said, "Here I am. You called me." But Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." So he went and lay down. Again the Lord called, "Samuel." And Samuel got up, went to Eli, and said, "Here I am. You called me." "My son," Eli said, "I did not call. Go back and lie down." Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord had not yet been revealed to him. A third time the Lord called, "Samuel." Samuel got up, went to Eli, and said, "Here I am. You called me." Then Eli realized that the Lord was calling the boy. So Eli told Samuel, "Go and lie down. If he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" So Samuel went and lay down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, calling, as at the other times, "Samuel, Samuel." Then Samuel said, "Speak, for your servant is listening." And the Lord said to Samuel, "See, I am about to do something in Israel that will make the ears of everyone who hears about it tingle." What an interesting word there. I will make their ears tingle. um, at this time I will carry out against Eli everything I spoke against his family from beginning to end. For I told him that I would judge his family forever because of the sin he knew about. His sons blasphemed God, and he failed to restrain them. Therefore I swore to the house of Eli, the guilt of Eli's house will never be atoned for by sacrifice or offering. And then Samuel lay down until morning, and then opened the doors of the house of the Lord. He was afraid to tell Eli the vision. But Eli called him and said, "Samuel, my son." Samuel answered, "Here I am." "What was he said to you?" Eli asked. "Do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide from me anything he told you." So Samuel told him everything, hiding nothing from him. Then Eli said, "He is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes." I'll end there. So, what's something that stood out to you with that? Crickets. I got
Yeah.
it.
No.
something that sticks out to me, at least, is how many times did God call for Samuel? And yet Samuel did not recognize who was calling. It was several. Not just once. Better question is, how did Eli not realize this after it happened like 2 previous times? It was on the third where he's like, ah, I understand now. And I think that kind of leads into our conversation that we had about discerning the voice of God. It's so difficult, especially for people that don't really know God and know how he speaks, to discern whether that is from us or God. The enemy is not in this conversation at all. This is a conversation between the discernment of self versus this is discernment of God. And it's kind of crazy because like Samuel's young. He's a young boy in this passage. He was raised up basically in the church from birth. So he kind of knows ins and outs of different things. Yet, what for me is almost the kicker is yet he was never really taught who God was. Despite growing up literally in the church.
Yeah.
Which that's its own, I guess, side sermon, if you will. I've always found this passage fascinating in multiple different ways, but especially when I think of like the discernment of voice and discernment of God in the midst of it. Okay, let's backtrack to what we were talking earlier. Okay, so how does God speak? Is it not constructive?
Yeah.
What does God tell Samuel? I'm about to do something that will change things.
Yeah.
However, I will also bring about what I said would happen to Eli.
Mm-hmm.
Which one may even look that's destructive in a way. Yeah, if you think of, let's say, like another really popular, I guess, picture that you see within the church is, the vine and the branches and the fruit.
Mm-hmm.
Or I guess I think of the story of the fig tree. Almost. Like, well, figs are supposed to like produce fruit, different things like that. Jesus curses the fig tree that it never produces fruit, withers and dies. And like when you think of like the fruitfulness of Eli's life, well, he had some pretty bad fruit. His son, like him fathering his sons and them doing what they did, kind of bad fruit. And what do you do with bad fruit?
I toss them out. For a lack of better
And
terms.
and if you think about it in gardening, that does help like the plant prosper.
Yeah.
By taking off what
Has
is
wilted
and harmed the overall health of the plant. What doesn't seem right is it directly affects those involved.
Mm-hmm.
It does lead to the demise of Eli and his family.
Yeah.
It seems harsh,
Yeah, I was just gonna say it sounds harsh.
but again, looking at a greater scope.
It almost helps to look at it using that gardening example. Um, and again, obviously, to look at it in the scope that we're looking at it is that it's people and relationships, and
Well,
it's much deeper than
and
just plants.
we're also looking at it like way in hindsight.
Right, 100%. I'm saying even in our own lives, that's easier said than done.
Oh yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but
Especially like imagine you're either Samuel or Eli here.
Mhm,
Well, that's happening to you in the moment.
how do you react? How do you respond in the way? Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I could do it. To be honest,
Like it's great cuz we know the full narrative. We know what change God was going to bring about. But for them,
they
it
didn't.
it wouldn't have even really come into play until like way later.
Yeah.
Like even after Samuel's life, did it not come into play? Like it didn't come into play.
Mhm.
So it's another kind of wrinkle
Mhm.
to discernment a little bit when it comes to understanding what is of God versus what is not.
Mhm.
And sometimes and I know this is kind of cliche to say, we don't know God's plans sometimes. We know the end result, like way in the future, but we don't know point A to point B.
Yeah, it's kind of like opening a book at the end, reading what the ending is, and then expecting to know what happens in between or how they got there. You don't.
And that's what makes things complicated. Well, how can you get from point A to point B? Like, I guess let's look in terms of like human history. What if World War One and World War Two never happened?
Mm.
How would the world be different? Obviously, this is taking a little bit of a hindsight route, but it would change quite a bit, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Some of the advances we even have would not exist. Because without the world wars, you don't have the Cold War. Without the Cold War, you don't have the rush in scientific improvement to get to where we are today, to even record a video like this. Obviously, it's really hard to think of alternate reality, but it really gets your mind going.
Yeah.
And that's the sort of framework that God's working with here. He's looking at things way in different perspective than we are. Because we can only think of things in terms of our own perspective at a specific point in time. We can't imagine what it's going to be like 100 years from now. Because to us, well, we're gone by that point. Sure, it'll impact like future generations and everything like that.
Sure.
And obviously there's connection there. But it's almost outside of the scope of our, what we can control.
Mm-hmm.
And not almost, it's very much out of our control. But we seem like we can think we can control it. Like we control our own destiny. You kind of see that in like video games and different things like that. It's like, well,
We
we
defy fate.
yeah,
I mean, how many times have you heard that line? Every JRPG ever.
just about. It yeah, that's my little soapbox moment, I guess. Let's actually get to the like. Okay, so how can you tell if you're getting talked to by the enemy versus God? Because sometimes what the enemy will do is disguise himself
Sure.
as though he is God who is
Mm,
talking to you. How can you tell the difference?
it's a great question. I think how do I want to phrase it? I think it really depends on, what the context of the situation is, right? Um, is the thing you're being talked to about ultimately to your it's hard to explain. Is it to your benefit or is it something that is destructive? Um,
And not necessarily your benefit,
sure.
but like community benefit, everything like that. Because sometimes the enemy will twist it and to say, "What's your benefit?"
Sure. I
instead
guess
of yeah.
yeah, I mean, think about it.
I
One thing
I
that
know
like
I
pops into my head 'cause my mind's going at like a million miles a minute right now. You almost look maybe this is cliche and a little stupid, but um, you steal a loaf of bread to feed your family. Well, you rationalize it. Well, I'm stealing to help my inner circle, the people that I care about, with complete disregard to who you're stealing from. The reasoning or what the voice in your head is saying. Yeah, but it's a good thing. You're helping the people you care about, so don't worry about the stealing part. Just forget about that. Forget about and you just completely disregard, what might happen to the merchant or the person that you're stealing from. I don't know.
yeah. Something that the enemy will do is speak in a lot of half truths.
Yeah.
You see this with Adam and Eve in the garden with the serpent. Where, oh, did God really say you couldn't eat from it? What was it really talking about?
Yeah.
I think, and then kind of the enemy, he twists his own narrative almost. Well, I think he just didn't want you to become like him. So you should defy him. You should do it anyway.
Hmm.
You should go against his
What's the
word.
worst that could happen?
It's kind of it's a little bit of rebellion, a
Yeah.
little bit. That's what it incites. And obviously we can be easily swayed by it. Um and obviously in that certain example in the story, well, we know how it plays out.
Yeah.
And you're like, "Oh, I would never."
You have.
However,
You did.
however, um that's just one example. Uh the enemy always speaks in that manner and can twist your own thoughts as to what is right and what is wrong. It also doesn't help that, like in the Bible, like sometimes you say, huh, that kind of contradicts itself a little bit,
Sure.
which then the enemy uses to kind of twist his own narrative, which complicates things further. Like, for example, even to your illustration before about stealing the bread and everything like that, well, it says also in the Bible that don't necessarily obey human laws, but obey God first, regardless if that breaks human laws. Because guess what? Jesus broke laws, human laws, but it's based on humanity and its desires versus God's desires. And that's what complicates things a little bit because what God breaks them for is for the sake of all and for helping and different things like that versus what is doing the other for. And it makes like the question of like the stealing, oh, I did it for my family and different things like that. It makes it really hard because you can justify it one way or another.
And I think that's the point I was trying to get at is, I feel like the enemy, he tries to get you to justify your actions with disregard to what the effects might be, whether it's on yourself or on those around you.
It kind of leads me to like the psychological question of, you have seemingly you have one of two choices. So a train's coming down the track.
I thought you were going to go red pill, blue pill.
No.
That's a later episode. Continue.
It's like one fish, blue fish. No, kidding. A fish, blue fish, whatever. So maybe you've heard this example before in the past in different avenues. So you have a train coming down and it's split. There's a track and it splits two ways. On one track, you have one person that's really close to you tied to the track, unable to escape. You would have to save them to let them escape. On the other track, you have like 50 different people that are completely unrelated to you. Also, same thing. You'd have to help them to get them off the track.
Do you save the one or do you save the 50?
What do you do?
And that is an impossible question to answer. Because, I think in the moment, you would want to justify saving the one. That's the person you're closest to. But can you justify letting 50 or however many other people die as a result of that? It's an impossible question. I don't know. I'm glad I'm not in that situation.
But that's the kind of things that the enemy will use to try to justify one way or the other.
Sure.
Where God, on the other hand, will tell you a third scenario of how all of that can be averted.
Sure.
Like, what's the story behind the story? Something that's off script, if you will. Well, actually, what you need to do is to prevent the train from leaving the station in the first place, and then you can save both. But that's kind of like a bird's eye view scope of things rather than the super hyper focused tunnel vision.
Right.
That's how God operates in something that sees the whole picture versus the little snapshot we're given with the question.
Mm-hmm.
That's how they speak differently.
It's a half truth versus the whole truth.
And sometimes it's really hard to tell the difference.
Yeah.
Because, well, we can only see from our own perspective. And we don't know the whole picture. So that's where it becomes difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it becomes a trust issue.
Sure.
Is, can we trust, God in the midst of this? Or what can we trust? Who can we trust? Sometimes why people think, oh, I'll do it on my own, is because they don't trust anybody but themselves, which is its own issue. I can tell you from experience that doesn't go well. But anyway, let's go to a little bit of testimony and then we'll probably call the episode. So, has there been like a good example of you listening from God? Maybe in terms of spiritual warfare or otherwise.
That is a great question. There's two moments that I can think of. One more recent, one more in the past. And the more recent one is one that I am still trying to discern. And I think I've shared it with you before, off screen. But we'll get into that. The one in the past, I think the clearest moment I can think of is when I was a sophomore at college. It was before I had transferred, and before I had started pursuing a degree in ministry. I was taking a world religions class because I had to. And it was the first day of classes. So what was that? Late August, something. And I remember coming home because I commuted, and I told my parents, I said, I don't know. I've got a bad feeling about this. I don't think this is where I'm meant to be. I feel, and it was just this very clear, like, calling to ministry. Like, I think this is what I need to do. Now, obviously, you fast forward years later, and I, you know, you've heard the story a million times. Um, and so they're still discerning with that and what that ministry looks like. I think there is some aspect of ministry still in my future that I'm pretty clear on. It's what that looks like that I'm still
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out. And so what I've really come to terms with though is that, and what is clear at this point, or at least I think it's clear. I guess things could change. I don't know. Is that calling to ministry wasn't this? Oh, it's going to be in a church job setting. I don't think that's what God was preparing me for. That's what I thought it was at the time. Um, what I believe it was, and again, this is the trial of you just hindsight's 2020, but you know, you go to college, you spend all this money, and then it's not exactly what you expected it to be, and it doesn't turn out the way you expected it to be, and now you're $30,000 in the hole, and so you're like, okay, God, what's the plan here?
And several years older, might
Yeah,
I add.
exactly. Um, and this has been something that's really been tough to wrap my mind around because again, that's a lot of money to spend. It's a lot of time to spend for it not to pan out the way you expect. But like I said, I don't think he was preparing me for a career in vocational ministry, but more he was setting my heart on ministry, preparing my heart in a pastoral way so that whatever that plan is in the future, whether, and I don't know what it is yet, but that I will approach it with a heart of ministry, with a heart of discipleship, stuff like that. That is what's clear to me at this point. Um, so that's the the long
The long and short of it.
the long and short of it. The more recent one, like I said, I'm still very much discerning on what that is, so I will probably refrain from going too into much detail about it.
And that's okay.
But the past one I feel very comfortable, sharing.
Yeah, and I'll kind of echo my own kind of experience. Very similar, I would think.
We've got very similar
Uh,
stories.
where, well, initially I went to school to be geologist, so I went into a geology degree. Kind of from the get go, I already knew that I was called elsewhere. I just didn't know where. And I'm like, yeah, this is great and all, but it just kind of seems like, okay, well, I guess it was something I was good at before,
Sure.
like with Science Olympiad, but I don't really feel anything from it.
Mm.
And that's what I was getting at. And then kind of God showed up in my life in a big way. I kind of talked about a little bit of, the spiritual warfare I was experiencing in my nightmares and different
Yeah.
things like that. And that God walked me through that situation, and God, wiped them away. Um, there was a lot of time of reflection
Yeah.
for me. I not like the, and this is the difference between, like I was talking about earlier, reflection versus like
Rumination.
rumination. You can be down on yourself all you want, but when you're reflecting, you're actually looking inward to see how you can change for the better.
Yeah.
Whereas the ruminating is you're focusing on all that's bad about you.
Yeah. Which is a really easy thing to do, by the way. I mean,
There's definitely been times I've done that.
yeah, I think everybody can would agree that.
But it's kind of at that point, and then fast forward a little bit of time. got the call to start seminary because, COVID happened. And
Great time to change course, right?
and God's like, well, good a time as any. So I'm like, okay. So I did that. Seminary wasn't exactly what I expected it to be, more ways than one, but I was still learning things in the midst of it.
Sure.
Then I went, and during that time of seminary, like, I was into it a little bit. Went for a position at a residency, and I felt like God really kind of called out a certain place because they reached out to me with an opportunity to learn and do things the way I expected things to go. Needless to say, once that happened and once I, locked onto it, that's when everything else started falling apart. So everything I was expecting fell through. Lead pastor left, all that kind of stuff. Things went up in the air, and I was kind of like a ship without a rudder. So here's the vessel. I'm the vessel. Lord, bring me where you want me to go. And I felt like I went nowhere.
Yeah.
And that was really hard. And I'm like, God, why did you call me to this location? And I really felt like it was from him. Just for everything to fall apart.
Yeah.
What are you trying to tell me in this? And I think it's, again, like you were saying, like, here's everything that you go into expecting going into something like ministry.
Yeah.
What does it actually look like? Like, when you think of ministry and you feel called to ministry, what does your first thought go to?
Well, I know for me, again, especially in those early years, it was, I'm going to work at a church. I'm going to do this and this and this. And then when all of that falls apart, it really shakes your entire view of what that is. And again, hindsight's 2020. Now I can look back, and it goes back to something that I know our church taught on really during COVID, but it was that church deployed idea where, you are the church. It's that idea that, that's a whole other conversation for another time. But so I'm not going to go too in detail.
But long story short, what God did was flip my expectations on their head.
It was almost a wake-up call, right? Like,
and basically is like, okay, what do you think ministry is if XYZ doesn't actually work? How can you still do ministry in the midst of XYZ? And what can that do to spur you forward to actually continue in like vocational, whatever ministry, if that doesn't include the programmatic nature of the church?
Sure.
How can you be the hands and feet without the church building?
Yeah.
Again, going to like church deployed. How can, and maybe this is a bad way of phrasing it, but like, how can I like singularly, can't even speak, be the hands and feet of God?
Yeah.
And I know you also want to look at that in terms of community as well.
Absolutely.
So like this podcast in general is one of the avenues that I felt God was kind of calling me down into. Obviously, I wasn't expecting it to blow up or anything. It still hasn't, FYI. unless you're looking at this way in the future and can prove me wrong, future me. But right now, as it stands, I can only see so far.
Yeah.
Again, this goes back into like the discernment of voices. I don't have Earth-size view of this situation right now. The only person that does is God.
Right. So you can only look at it from, hey, our highest viewed video is one on werewolves,
And
like, and
vampires.
vampires and
And
unicorns.
unicorns.
Which it's a great episode, by the way, just to plug it. It's very funny, but I think that was still only 70 views. That's not exactly that's not
Well,
blowing up.
it was over 100 views.
Oh, is it
But
really?
yeah.
Last time I checked, it was 70. Hey, look at that! Woo! But still, that's not exactly something that's gonna hit the headlines.
No,
Right?
it's not the millions and millions of views that you see
Exactly.
other videos have. But if you're like for me, if I'm expecting that, I'm already gonna be disappointed
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
because that's not what I think God is calling this. If it can get to that point and affect that many people and really help that many people, awesome.
Yeah.
Glory to God. It's nothing that we're doing that's anything special.
Yeah, we come here on Sunday afternoons, sit down, have a conversation, crack a few jokes.
But I want to be like real with you guys. And maybe that's partially why I don't edit the videos, cuz it shows more of the realness of the things that we're going through. Some episodes are a flop. I'll just be 100% honest.
Yeah, you can almost always tell too, because we'll stop recording and then we kind of just turn to each other like, yeah, that was rough. Like, that wasn't good. But it still goes on YouTube. It still gets posted, unedited in all its glory.
And then there's other times where there's really deep, meaningful conversation that I think can really help somebody who's
Sure.
going through a similar situation, whatever that may be. And that's not something I know, but that's something that God knows. And I pray that these kind of videos will come out and you will hear them when you need to hear them.
Yeah.
And it's not us talking at that point. That's God talking through us.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've always at least thought with this podcast too, is like, it could be years down the line, whether we're still doing it or not, who knows? But those videos will still be out there, and 20 years down the line, maybe not 20. Who knows? Maybe
Who knows?
But point is, years down the line, whether we're still sitting here having these conversations or not, one of those videos somebody might fall upon them and watch them, and it might really meaningfully impact them. And at that point,
and it's
done exactly what it was meant to
do. It
do.
doesn't need to be 1 million.
No.
It just needs to be one.
And I think it is something that's difficult to grasp, because obviously there's the personal side of it where you want it to explode. You want it to do super well. You want it to be this, and this. That might not be what God has in store. It might just be one.
And maybe that's our own limitations because we're not techie at all, and you may or may not have noticed that by now. But, like, long story short, what we're doing is to try to go for that bird's eye view scope of things versus that microscopic view that we often have. There's a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
And is it a big undertaking to like talk about some of these things, especially when you talk about like spiritual warfare, for example? With that, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of doubt that creeps in. Am I doing the right thing? Like, what does ministry actually look like for me? Like, a lot of times, like, I've seriously considered, am I going the right direction?
Sure. I feel that. Relate.
Because I'm sorry, I don't really want to be a pizza guy for the rest of my life.
Also feel that.
And that's just me being real.
Yeah. No, I think.
But at the same time, I don't really know what the next step is. And that's where the discernment comes into play.
Yeah.
What guides your next steps? Is it your own voice? Is it the enemy? Or is it God? And how do you know if you're going the right direction? That's what makes it difficult.
And that, ladies and gentlemen, is discernment of the voices.
Sorry, it's not one clear picture, but as they say, that's a wrap.
Yeah, that feels like a really good spot just to end it before we ramble on for who knows how long.
All right, that'll be it for this week. Catch you guys next week on who knows what, and
Plans change.
God only knows. Anyway, take care, guys.
See
Have
ya.
a great week.